Thank you, Brilliant, for sponsoring this video. I've been reading through a lot of physical books recently. You can see this is the most recent one. It's about 300 pages long. I'm going through this now. And what I want to do is share how I'm taking notes on those books in Obsidian and then turning it into something that I can remember and use in whatever it is that the book is talking about. Now, I personally use Obsidian as my note taker. If you don't want to use Obsidian, this would work with Microsoft Word or Apple Notes or anything else. But you can see I've got this file, and at the top of the file, I've got the name of the book. This is one that I did before. I should probably mention that the books I'm reading, so this is the one that you just saw, I'm turning them into video essays to help my own learning, so if you want to see them, I'll link it up there. But at the top of the file, I have a main heading, so a heading 1 called Planning, and this is just planning to scope out and understand why I'm reading the book, like what is the point of me reading the book? Now, I recognize packaging sounds YouTube specific, but it's adding a task constraint to reading the book. What am I hoping to get out of reading the book, or what is the point of reading the book? What I got wrong about repetitive practice. How blacksmiths should have changed education, but it didn't work, or the ultimate guide to repetitive practice. There are various ways or narratives that I could describe the point, the reason behind reading the book. This title, for example, was written before I'd started reading the book, and then this one was in chapter 3 when it started talking about Bernstein's repetition without repetition. So there might be a title or a piece of packaging when I start reading the book, but as I read through the book, things may emerge, and these are the highest level notes that I would take on a book. It's not notes about the book, it's notes about my reasoning behind reading the book. The hook options section is mainly to help me understand in future, okay, is there a question, is there a statement, is there a story behind why it is that I'm reading the book? Most of the time with academic textbooks, and I'm just going through the long list, I don't want a hook option, but for shorter books, so for example, these two books, you've got Conscious Coaching and then the Talent Code, they're shorter books. I had hooks for them, like what is the hook for the reason of reading this book? The Talent Code, if I have a question, what is talent? Or Conscious Coaching, is there unconscious coaching or is it just conscious? And the burning questions is similar uses, but because I know How We Learn to Move, I know the author and I've read a lot of his work already, I don't really have any burning questions because I knew what to expect in the book. And even though I know what's in Ali's book because I helped him in the writing process, I'm still going to add questions at the start because I don't know what it is that I really want to get out of reading the book. And I'll get the questions from the chapters so I can see chapter 1, play, chapter 2, power, chapter 3, people, and that's part 1, energize. So I'll ask questions about play. What is play? Is that deliberate play? Is that play as in fun in activities? Is that play as in the way that we perceive play? How is he defining play? So before I start reading the book, I'll have questions that I want to try and answer as I go and read through. In the next section, I have sources. This is a main heading, so you can see we've got the outline on the right. We've got the planning, which is what we've just gone through. Sources. This is mainly just added to as I'm reading through the book. If there is a video mentioned, or a figure mentioned, or a story mentioned, or an academic article that's mentioned, or another book, I make sure I add the source in, if it's interesting to me at least, and so that I can reference it and actually go and have a look. So this book had 68 references that I found useful, but as you can see, 67 Gotham Chess, that's a YouTube video. That wasn't actually in the book. And this is where, as an ecological psychologist, I would use terms like representative practice and constrained practice because as I'm reading the book, it's not isolated, it's connected to all of the other learning experiences I've had. So while I was reading the book, I was also watching things on YouTube, and Gotham Chess did a video, and he was talking about creativity in the game of chess. Now, creativity is a chapter in the book. I think it's chapter 11 or 12. No, I just counted, it's chapter 10. I was close. But they were talking about creativity in the book, and I watched a video from Gotham Chess about creativity, and there was a connection there. So I added the source inside of the book file because Gotham Chess's video is related to the practice, the thinking that I was going through whilst reading the book. So a lot of the sources aren't actually in the book. They're things that I may have thought about whilst reading the book, or other sources that I had already read, consumed, captured in some way beforehand, brought it in as a reference, and then used it in the script, in the script project notes of writing the book. And this is where the next section comes in, points. If there's something I'm reading about during the book that I think about, then I'll add it in the points, whether it's in the book or just related. You can see there's a YouTube timestamp here, so this is a link to a timestamp of a video that I watched probably whilst during reading the book. So maybe I read the book in the morning and then I watched YouTube and this became relevant as I watched it in the evening, so I added the point here. And that's the same for these other videos. There's a screenshot of different videos in here, and these are points that I thought might be relevant to this book project. For those familiar with Obsidian, you can see drills and technique is actually a link. It's a backlink. So if I zoom in, you can see back bracket, so the square brackets, and this links to another file inside of Obsidian, and for me, it's a project file. I can tell because there's a little camera there, so it's a video project. If I have a look at the top, you can see How We Learn to Move. That's a video project, so I'm going to turn it into a video essay, and they are stored in my projects folder. So I have a file called drills and techniques. You can see the outline is exactly the same. We've got the planning with the hooks, the questions, the sources. We've got a couple of sources in there, and then points. And the reason I've added this in here is because I think this video project, this project about drills and technique and what drills and technique mean or don't mean in different sports, different practice design, inside of school learning, etc., how all of these ideas relate to the book topics, How We Learn to Move. And as I scroll down in the points section, you can see there's loads of other points that I've thought about. But I've actually finished the script for this project. Yes, this is a video, but I still write scripts on books that I'm not putting into videos because it's my notes about the book. So for these two books, I have a script, but they're not up on YouTube. They're not videos. They're just book scripts. It's exactly the same as the one that I'm showing you, except it's just not on YouTube yet. And if you're wondering, well, what am I going to do with all of these points that aren't in the script? Well, there's a reason why these points aren't in the script, and each of these points will have different reasons for them not being in the script, but what will likely happen is when I go to the drills and techniques video essay here is because it's linked, so if I go to this file and I go to the linked mentions, you can see How We Learn to Move. When I go back to this as I'm writing it, then I will see, oh, maybe bifurcations is related, maybe I want to talk about the noise and pink noise, white noise, brown noise, and add that into drills and techniques. So I keep them in the book project file because they're points related to the book, but they're not points that I would want to have in my notes when I'm trying to explain, understand, or think through the topics discussed during the book. Now, when you actually have a look at the chapters, I'm going to try and show you as many chapters as I can there. You can see there's 15, but the chapter names are long, and I want to make sure that I know what the chapter's talking about for me. So as an example, the second chapter, We Are Built to Produce and Detect Variation, I've renamed that to Variability is Everywhere. You can see we've got the hook, which isn't actually a chapter in the book. That's me explaining my reasoning, my understanding of why I'm reading the book. The chapter 1, which is One Technique, which is quite similar to the books chapter, which is the myth of the one correct repeatable technique, so I've just shortened it. But chapter 2, Variability is Everywhere, for me means something different to We Are Built to Produce and Detect Variation. And then I expand on what this means to me during the notes of the chapter. So you can see I do have some quotes from the book, and I make sure I put the page in so I know what page the quotes is from. And then any other quotes that come from other sources, you can see I've added in the number to the source. So this is just two square brackets surrounding a number, 14. So when I go shift right arrow key, I've now opened up the file twice, and I can jump all the way to the top to the list. And then you can see 14, so that's Nadal 2012, Rafa, My Story. So that's a quote from the book that I read from a different book. But I make sure I source the original source that the quote actually came from, so I can actually go and find it, and if I do decide I want to read the book, I can. And the rest of these words, you'll notice they are short sentences, and what I've tried to do is abbreviate. I tried to shorten down the book into words that make sense for me, so I've explained the entire chapter of the book in about 500 words in this case, and some of them are quoted. But even though there are less words, for me, this is more dense with information because I've removed all of what I would class as filler words. As an example, this line here, heart rate variability, or HRV, is a good thing. In the book, that's almost a page. So to give you a practical example, one that I'm working with right now from the book that I'm reading, this one, there is 14 pages at the start before chapter 1. And when I come into the active notes that I'm taking on the book, you can see this is chapter 1, status quo, and all of these words here represent 14 pages. Now, I know, for me, what Alex's story is when it comes to basketball and learning basketball, and I've made a couple of notes here, for me, that explain what his experience was. If I drag this over to the side so you can have a comparison, this one line will probably be a lot of this together, then this line will probably be these things together. This will likely get condensed into a line, we then have a quote, another line, a quote, and then probably one more line, so I've summarized 14 pages in 7 lines and 2 quotes. And for me, this is more representative practice because I'm thinking through the ideas through my own experiences rather than through Alex's writing. To add some clarity to that, what I'm doing is I'm thinking about my experience, what Alex is writing about his experience coaching basketball, and then trying to match them up. So I know Alex's story, he talks about stretching, then drills, then a game. I had the same experience, so I will use that when I'm summarizing my notes to say, I remember doing static stretches at the start of a session, and Alex did the same thing. So I'm creating connections between my experience and the reading. My experiences coming from either my practical experiences playing the sport or experiences watching videos like I mentioned with the Gotham chess. And even though I'm already 2.5 pages into this first chapter, I haven't written any notes because there's nothing significant to me that I would want to write about. Which begs the question, what is significant to me? And this is again where I'm going to use some terms from ecological psychology, the organism-environment relationship, so me within the environment, that relationship will shift and is dynamic throughout time. So what's significant to me as I read that chapter may be different from when I read the next chapter, which is actually why when I'm writing my notes inside of Obsidian, I may add a note to chapter 1, chapter 2 when I'm reading chapter 7 or 8 because I've thought about something that was mentioned in those earlier chapters that I didn't really fully grasp the importance of until a later chapter. As an example, in the How We Learn to Move book, you can see here in chapter 2, so variability is everywhere, I'm talking about injury. Now, when I first read this stuff about injury and knee pain, I thought, okay, yeah, whatever, I've heard all of this before, adding variability, decrease pain. Yes, fine. But it wasn't until the last chapter of the book where Rob goes specifically into detail about ACL injuries and some of the more complex reasoning and studies behind injury prevention that I thought, actually, this relates to that information in chapter 2, which was down here. So I added the notes in chapter 2 after reading chapter, whatever the last one is, 13, 15. For those people familiar with this channel, you may be familiar with this book. I did a video essay on this about a month ago, and while I was reading through the How We Learn to Move book, I actually thought, oh, that reminds me of the study in chapter 12 in this book, which is about Bab and Baz tugging on the jaw because of synergies and motion. So even though I've finished the essay, I've finished the project on this book, reading through the How We Learn to Move book, I was referencing this one and the ideas from this one inside of the file. So I've just done a very quick search. I just did a Control F for Bab because I know there's going to be a word, and there it is. That's in the boss of the body, the central executive. There's the reference 22, so Shift right arrow, go up to the list, go down to 22. It's there. That's the Kelso study. So that's not the study that was in the book, which was this this video essay. So you can see this is a much longer video essay. There's some setup points, some questions. But you can see if I search for Bab, there it is. There's the word Bab. And in this one, the reference number is 16. But I know what the reference is because I remember Bab. And I also remember Baz, but this is where I'm arguably duplicating information because it's in two files. It's in this project file and this project file. But to me, they mean different things because in the How We Learn to Move one, it's talking about perturbations and variations of coordination. Whereas in the first video essay, it's talking about not being anatomical movement patterns for motor coordination. So the significance changes with the relationship between me and the book and the environment that I'm working in, the context I'm in essentially. So I'm taking notes all the way through reading the book and after reading the book. But of course, everyone takes notes slightly differently. This is how I take notes on physical books and also articles and Kindles. It's just the note taking is obviously I can highlight things and bring them in automatically rather than having to type them out all the time. But reading a book helps my knowledge about something, not knowledge of something. So when I'm actually doing something, practicing things, such as using this book, Transforming Basketball, it's coaching sports. So how am I putting that into practice? Well, into my coaching. So when I'm coaching trampoline, it's putting it into practice. It's using the information in interactive ways. And that is what Brilliant, the sponsor of this video, try and do with their lessons. They have interactive lessons for you to explore various different topics. Their focus is on problem solving, hands-on problem solving, not focused on memorizing the answers to questions or rote repetition, but solving problems yourself, doing the practice, engaging in the thinking. Brilliant also encourages consistent engagement building habits or daily practices with looking at various elements of different materials, whether it be maths or data. And for me, even though my field is ecological psychology, and psychology you wouldn't think is very mathematically inclined, a lot of the data when it comes to predictive processing, active inference, and the models used to describe how the brains work uses Bayes' rules and Bayesian statistics, which I'm using Brilliant to help me understand. To try everything Brilliant has to offer free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/DannyTalksTech. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. But if you're interested to see what these videos actually turn into, what I'm actually learning from reading the books, then maybe have a look at my second channel, which I'll link over here.